Emily Fohr, Jazzy Mitchell, both writers, and Jazzy with a little bit ahead of the game because you have 4 books out now and a fifth coming out.
The fifth one just came out, so now it's five.
Matt, okay. And Emily, your book is about to launch.
Yeah, it's my debut novel. I should be getting a release date sometime within the next month, so stay
That's
tuned for
very
that.
exciting. So let me start by asking you. You both are on the precipice of, or in the midst of a new book coming out. What is that experience like? Jazzy, let me start with you because you've been through this now several times, and you also need to say, does it get easier?
No. I'm sorry to say that, but you know what? All I do for each book is I start gearing up about a month ahead of time with a list of possible reviewers and friends who I can bug to read the book and review the book. And so that part it takes some work. And then just that visibility, you really have to get your energy up to be advertising and promoting and marketing the books and yourself. And truthfully, that can be hard at times. You need to do it on social media. You don't want to say the same thing all the time, so you need to come up with little things to say. And photos are always good. So, a photo of the book, or some sort of advertisement, a quote from the book, anything like that you can do is important for promoting it. But it doesn't really get easier. I think you just become more familiar with the process.
It's interesting to note that the creative process of writing the book, once that's completed, you're starting a whole new creative process.
Right. And,
right?
With the smaller presses, I think that's really important that writers understand that you do have to promote yourself. It isn't just up to the press. And what's wonderful is in the past 20 years, you've seen that there's so much more sapphic romances and sapphic writing and fiction and even nonfiction where we didn't have it 20 years ago. But that also means that we need to be seen, we need to become visible. And that's why we need to do more nowadays than maybe 20 years ago when there wasn't much out there.
And Emily, what's this like for you right now, getting ready to launch?
It's surreal. So like Jazzy said, there's a lot of self-promotion that's involved. But for me, I wake up every day having to pinch myself. And I'm in this headspace where I'm like every single day where I get closer and closer to completing all the steps in this process of getting the novel published. That I don't want to jinx myself almost because it's like a dream come true. You know what I mean? So for me, it's just every day I'm excited. I'm thankful. I'm trying not to kind of get ahead of myself. That's what it is. You know what I mean?
Have you both always written creatively for expression or for fun or communication?
Yeah, I have always loved writing since I was very small. The first longer type of piece I've written was actually a screenplay. I started writing screenplays in college. Just on a whim, I YouTubed how to write screenplays because there's a specific format. I YouTubed it and then I started writing. The first screenplay I wrote was a semifinalist in the San Francisco International Screenwriting Competition in 2019. So that was really exciting. And then during quarantine, I, as most of us were very bored, I started writing one day and I came out of quarantine with a novel. So that's where I'm at personally.
Wow. Jazzy, what did you do during quarantine?
During quarantine, I did finish 2 books. So the first book came out I guess it was last year. It was called Undertow, or 2 years ago, and it was about a female running for president. So that I got that out, and then this other one took forever because COVID started to wear on us, and quarantine wore us down. I had 2 children in the house every day; they couldn't go to school. It was online schooling. And it took a lot longer to finish Leveling Up, which came out 2 months ago. So.
Wow. Did you feel, is there ever a point when you go, this isn't working, I'm just going to put it aside, or I'm just going to move on to a new book, or I'm just going to, walk away for whatever the process is? Did you have that with this last book?
Yes, actually, it's funny because the next book project that I'm working on, I had put aside during the pandemic and the lockdowns. I just couldn't get into it. My characters weren't talking to me. I know that may sound a little weird, but truthfully, they tell me their story, and I just was not hearing it. So I put that project aside, and I'm going to go back to it now, actually.
Emily, do you have that also where your characters like help you shape the story?
So with this novel that I have coming out, I was writing from one viewpoint, and it was very much a specific personality I had in mind for this, my main character. But for this second, I'm actually working on a second novel, and I'm writing from like 4 or 5 different perspectives. Each character gets a chance to narrate, and so I would say yes, definitely. Sometimes I find myself having to reread 100 pages just to make sure I have the right mentality of the character who's narrating in that specific moment. So it's a lot of reading, rereading, rewriting, all that stuff.
Right. Did either of you ever take part in National Novel Writing Month?
Oh,
NaNoWriMo?
I used to. I don't do it now. I just feel like over time, as I've gotten into writing more and having everything published, it was a little too much pressure for me. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, you're
Right.
supposed to write a novel in 1 month, right?
Right. 30 days.
And I suppose I could do that, but it wouldn't be very readable.
No.
So.
The thing that and I've never done it. My daughter does it. I know that I'm not going to get a novel done in 30 minutes, in 30 days, so I don't even bother to try. But the thing the one rule that they have that I find probably very useful is you're not allowed to go back and do any editing. It's only moving forward. And I wonder how that works in terms of it, when you're writing a book, like Emily, you were just saying how you have to go back and look at everything again. Do you find when you're going back that then you start changing things, and then instead of moving forward, you're just kind of stuck like reshaping that sculpture you have already? Does that become a trap?
I think that I think that when I go back and reread, my character development is better because I'm really getting it ingrained in my head what this specific character would do, say, think, act. So I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it really helps me get into the zone of being that specific character, and really helps the development of the story. I think if I had to write a novel completely all the way through and I wasn't allowed to go back and edit, I'm not sure there would be any character development. I might be stagnant, staying in the same place the whole time. So.
Right. And what about you, Jazzy?
I usually try and write an outline before I start writing the book. And then once I start writing the book, I end up revising my outline because that's when I get to know my characters and what's going on. I used to always handwrite out my books. And then when I was typing it, I would end up editing it. And nowadays, usually I'm typing, but I end up rereading everything I've written before I start a new chapter. So I guess the short answer is no, I can't do that. I need to keep going back.
Well, it makes sense what you were talking about when your characters start dictating to you what wants to happen. They don't care you have an outline written. Did you always do an outline? Has that always been part of your process?
I always do it because I forget things, especially the little details of a character, the little quirks. But even like their eye color or, their siblings or their dog's name. I don't want to forget that later on and have something throw the reader out because I said the wrong thing. So, yeah, right. I always keep an outline. Always. Right. And I update it.
It's like a certain type of acting where people create an entire bio for their character before they perform that part. So they know their history, even though their history isn't part of what's on screen, it becomes part of the performance. So that's a pretty in-depth way of developing your book. Now, the book that you're going to read us an excerpt from, what's the name of that? That's your
Leveling Up.
Leveling Up. Okay. But before I do that, we did talk about we were going to be having some trivia questions. So for anybody listening, you have an opportunity now to win a free book, but you have to be the first one to answer this question correctly. And it's not too hard. Who was the first woman to serve as a Supreme Court justice? So if you can type in your answer and we'll get a winner. But in the meantime, if we can ask Jazzy to read an excerpt from Leveling Up.
Oh, great. So here's Leveling Up, in case you haven't seen it yet. This came out at the end of January, and it's about a talented video game graphic designer and animator named Clark, who re-enters the life of her former mentor 6 years after finishing up her internship. So she bumps into a former colleague and they agree to meet for dinner that night to catch up. I am reading from the second part of chapter 1, so it's right at the beginning. And actually, the name of chapter 1 is The Beginning of the Rest of Her Life. After joining Harry at the restaurant, Clark listens with a rabid hunger as Harry updates her without prompting on the happenings at Haboob Software. We've been working nonstop to develop End of the World, the greenhouse effect, so we can release it for the Christmas season. That's the name of what's going to be the best game introduced this year. The designer's an up-and-comer. She came out of nowhere. What is that? Some kind of apocalyptic game? Shoot 'em up stuff? Or is it more speculative fiction and world building? More like science fiction, unfortunately. The central storyline is how humankind has affected the climate. The player has to make choices which lead to an uninhabitable world or the healing of it. The graphics are sick. Reminds me of your style. Sig brought a good chunk of the graphics and animation to us, which is unusual. That's why we were able to fast track it. What Harry says rings in her ears and she gasps. Her hands begin to tremble. Who did you say? Sig Sassy. About 9 months ago, she demanded an audience with La Silvetti. Luckily for her, the game was good enough to excuse her arrogance. She said she was working on it for years, and with the advanced stage it was in, we believed her. It's weird how we've never heard of her before. She said she was in Frankfurt for a few years honing her skills. He cocks his head. You look like you've seen a ghost. What's up? Clark feels shockwaves rushing through her system. Sig Sassy? Did you say Sig Sassy? Oh no. She leans forward, an urgent need to warn Harry washing through her. Harry, you can't release that game. It will ruin the company. Slow down, Clark. What are you talking about? Harry is alarmed by Clark's reaction. Clark is alarmed too. She knew Sig was jealous when she realized Clark still harbored a raging crush on Fran Silvetti, the former creative director and present CEO of Haboob Software. What were the chances that her ex-girlfriend stole Clark's video game schematics and sold them to her former employer? Rather good, evidently. Clark takes a deep breath and exhales on a silent count of 5 to calm herself. Harry, she's a crook. She stole that game from my laptop. I've spent the last 18 months developing it for Runaway Games, and I was going to submit the rest of the animation next week. I can prove it. Jesus. Harry exhales. If Sig doesn't own the rights. He slouches in his seat, one hand rubbing the back of his neck. Tell me you haven't paid her anything. I wish I could. We paid in advance, not to mention the money that's gone into developing the game and advertising it. Everything's prepped. I'll send you the proof. Timestamps and schematics, email exchanges with the design team, even my early storyboards and artwork. Harry takes an inelegant gulp of his red wine and leans back against his chair. You have to send the work product directly to Fran today. Clark feels lightheaded at the thought and begins to shake her head emphatically. No way. No way. I won't do it. It has to come from you, Harry. Clark, come on. You're overreacting here. You need to send it to her. We don't have time to send it up the chain. Clark ignores Harry's reasonable request. She doesn't want to hear it. Nope, no can do. Not gonna happen. I haven't spoken to that woman in 6 years. What do you suppose she's going to think if she gets an email from me unexpectedly like this? Clark finishes her drink. I'll tell you, she'll wonder just what the hell I'm up to. She'll immediately believe I'm trying to sabotage her in some way. Clark waves her hands around as agitation gets the better of her. And let's not even get into how many ways I can be fired for sharing this stuff. You know the deal. So tell Dirk the jerk what happened. He'll be thrilled to partner with us. We have the workforce and we'll incorporate the work you've done on it. Call him now. With a sigh, Clark hits Dirk Waters' number. He's the creative director for Runaway Games. As soon as she hears Dirk's voice, her heart speeds up. Dirk, is Clark. I just found out that Gassed Out was sold from under us to Haboob Software 9 months ago. She holds the cell phone away from her ear, grimacing at the loud curses. She can see from Harry's expression that he can hear each word. Dirk, hey, wait, calm down, listen. Clark looks up at the ceiling, pressing her lips together as she waits for Dirk to run out of steam. Okay, I know it seems bad, but we can come back from this. As a new flood of loud curses causes Clark to hold the phone away from her ear again, Harry snaps his fingers and moves his hands in a gimme motion. She hands the cell phone to him. Hello, Dirk. It's Harry from Avoob Software. I know you're upset. You have every reason to be. I know your company has been developing the game for a lot longer than we have. It seems we were both duped, but we're going to sort this out. Come meet me tomorrow at 9. Yes, at the Brightman Cook building. We'll get everything settled and back on track. Don't worry. If it wasn't for Clark, we'd be in a heap of trouble. Yes, she's a keeper. Bye-bye. Tucked in the corner of the booth chair, Clark watches Harry as he places her phone on the table, a serious look on his face. Back to the other matter. Send the information to Fran tonight. She doesn't hate you. In fact, she knows you're a respected animator. You made quite a name for yourself in a relatively brief period of time, and she's kept track. She'll know the information is legitimate, and I'll have her be part of the meeting tomorrow morning. Clark places her head in her hands, not sure what to do. All right, how about this? Send it to Fran and to me. I'll mention that we had dinner and this came out. She'll believe you anyway, but I'll emphasize how you've been developing the game for over a year and tell her about the meeting. But then she'll know my email address. Clark can't help the whining tone of her voice. Harry smirks. So, come on, Cap. Just do it. It's the only way we can keep on schedule while taking care of Sig. A twinkle in Harry's eyes warns Clark that he's about to tease her. Besides, what do you think is going to happen? She'll start spamming you? They stare at each other. Clark throws a wadded napkin at him. Fine, you bastard. I'm so glad we bumped into each other. She mentally stomps her foot even as she capitulates. Me too, Harry sings songs as he waves the server over to order another round of drinks.
Well, there's a lot of humor in that, which is really, really fun.
Thank you.
And so what happens?
You're such a good storyteller, Jazzy. That was really captivating. You
That was
all the
great,
voices and
really.
stuff. I love
Now,
that.
well, I can't even, I don't want you to tell me anything, but I have all these questions now. Let me start with, where do you come up with names? Like, how do you go, well, this person is this name? And Clark is like a very ambiguous name. It's a
Right.
you know, intergender name. So how would you wind up with Clark?
It's funny because when I first started writing, I would use ambiguous names that could go either way, feminine or masculine. And I've kind of veered away from that now. I think more about the characteristics I want in my character, and then I use a name generator, and I'll just go through hundreds of names. And just,
Name
that's
generator.
just the first name, and then there's the last name. You know, you have to find the last names that
Yeah.
match with the first name. So
Yeah.
for me, it's a process. That said, sometimes I will stumble upon a name and say, that is a great name for a character in my book.
Do you
So,
keep a list of
I
potential
do.
names?
I do.
Mm.
Do you do that, Emily?
No. I for my novel, I think I looked at baby names online, like French baby names, and that's how I got the names.
French baby names. Wow. So now tell me about your book, Emily.
Oh, okay. So I wrote some notes down just to make sure I cover everything. But so the title of my book is Just a Birdhouse. And at
I love that.
thank you,
Just a
thank you.
birdhouse.
At its core, it's a coming of age story. After graduating college, my protagonist, Bellamy Artois, she goes on a vacation with her mom.
What's her name?
Bellamy.
Bellamy.
Yeah. And so she goes on vacation with her mom to this like fishing village on the western coast of France. And she visits her grandfather there. And she rekindles, a relationship with a childhood friend named Apolline. And Apolline is also the heiress to the biggest and fanciest hotel in town. But she doesn't, you wouldn't know that by looking at her. She doesn't act like it. She's wild and carefree and, just spontaneous. Everything that Bellamy is not. So Bellamy kind of narrates her summer adventures, romanticizing all of her experiences that take place in this kind of close-knit village. So she meets the owner of the boulangerie, Francois, He really takes a liking to her, and she gets kind of caught up in understanding the difference between being wanted and wanting someone. And then she, as well, she has complicated feelings. Bellamy and Apolline have complicated feelings with each other. What's friendship? What's more than friendship? What's expected of them? And it's just it's Bellamy coming into her own, finding her voice, curating these intimate, meaningful relationships with not only Apolline, but her grandfather, this wine aficionado, her breezy, kind of fleeting mother, and even like the barman at the pub. It's just her life. Yeah.
I see. Do you want to read an excerpt now?
All right, I'll read an excerpt, and I have it on my computer because I don't have a copy of the book yet. So I got to look at the computer here to read it. Okay, and this is chapter 8. I don't think it really needs too much preface, so I'll just begin reading. Let me do this. All right, here we go. Okay, chapter 8. Steeping pomegranate tea and arduous knitting lessons molded the mornings I spent letting my mother and grandfather keep me company. After I admitted to Papali about stealing his shirt and giving it to Francois, he gave me 2 outstanding options: either ask for the shirt back or invite the baker over for dinner. Excited with the prospect of filling Papali's tiny home with young and lively guests, my mom suggested I invite Apolline as well, enthralling my grandfather, who promptly left to buy overpriced spirits for the occasion. Gilded with sunlight, I rode my bike up into the hills into the tourism district. It wasn't often I ventured over the bluffs to Tinseltown. When I did, it was almost always certain that I wouldn't be able to find Apolline. She preferred the lackadaisical nature of the worn cottages and small market below, creating her own chaos amongst the perpetual calm. The birds were too prim here, she had once told me. It didn't feel natural for birds to have manners. At the entrance to the Hotel Al-Ari, I parked the chipped yellow bike neatly in the rack and smoothed my fleece shirt over my matching fleece shorts. The lobby was just as grand as I had remembered, full of sparkling marble and opal accents. At the reception desk, I bounded back and forth with a confused old lady, her hair full of gossip and uncouth judgments. I tried to explain that Apolline was a friend of mine, but Muriel wouldn't hear of it, claiming Apolline was around somewhere floating between her many friends, many of which she didn't need, I wasn't sure, but Muriel seemed to have an oddly large soft spot for Apolline, almost if she were afraid that I was going to corrupt her. As our conversing became irritant and Muriel was ready to run me out into the streets, I noticed a tiny Filipino woman scurrying behind the counter. "Madame Mallory," I exclaimed, nearly jumping over the desk and giving Muriel a heart attack. Madame Mallory, as stated before, was a proper, brisk, and tiny woman of immense power. She'd met Monsieur Mallory when he was on a business trip in Rhode Island and promptly moved to France with him upon his return. Their marriage of 25 years stood only to prove that Madame Mallory was able to keep the things she wanted, despite Monsieur Mallory's remarkably unfavorable family, who happened to loathe anyone who came between them and the prowess of their finances. Turning abruptly, Madame Mallory greeted me with a quick and stale kiss, jumpy as usual. She made me promise that it was my grandfather who had been buying all the Gâteau Basque and not anyone else. After repeatedly assuring her that it was my family with the affinity for Gâteau Basque, she continued on in English for both mine and Muriel's sake. The woman's hair was stuffed with secrets. "And your grandpa is the one buying 3s of everything? Everywhere I turn, 3 croissants are missing, 3 fresh baguettes. Why, this morning, 3 bouquets of irises were gone from the florist. And yes, I know this because yesterday I went to scout some summer plants for the garden, and there were only 5 bouquets of irises left, and I knew I should have bought them then, but I figured they'd be there today. Well, they're not. The things I need are always gone." She looked at me, out of breath, waiting for a response. I laughed affectionately. No, we only buy hordes of food, not flowers," I said. "I wasn't always like this, but the moment you let your guard down, someone else has the things you need," she huffed. Unsure how to bridge the gap, we both sighed, Madame Mallory out of distress and I out of uncertainty. Will you let Apolline know she's invited to dinner at my grandpa's tonight? He's going to make cocktails, my mom is cooking a cassoulet, and I think we might even have a game of petanque in the backyard. You're welcome to come as well." Looking at her with timid eyes, I absorbed her light smile as she patted me on the shoulder. "You are always my favorite friend of Apolline's. I think her favorite too. I'll let her know. What time?" She gave Muriel a look as she grunted by the phone book. I told Madame Mallory that dinner was at 7:30 sharp and sprinted out of the lobby before anyone could say they ever saw me there, leaving coarse pieces of fleece to litter the marbled floors. There was a church in town, just one, It knelt, glorified, on the steep of the longest cliff in St. David. I ran here for the first time on that sweltering afternoon, afraid I'd forgotten what cathedral bells sounded like. Caught in the rafters of the surging trees nestled primly together in the furthest stretch of secluded overhangs that dotted the church garden, I dangled upside down. Lazily, I ate an apple, scraping the skin with my thumb, letting the blood rush to my head. The surging red in my eyes painted the town with scalding fire. I was supposed to be on my way to invite Francois to dinner. Yet this was the first moment I felt I had supremely to myself. Melancholic anonymity shifted upward. I walked from limb to limb, suppressing myself from myself. Ardent birds flew in between my arms, above and below me, unaware I was even there. I felt distant from all that I had, and all that I was, and all that I wanted. This stupor of nature's quelling silence completed my understanding that everything just came to be. I saw a priest cross the lawns. He smiled at me cheerily and continued on, unbothered by my presence, just like the birds. When I invited Francois over for dinner, he was bashful, then upset I hadn't told him about this prestigious event earlier. How was he supposed to bake something special in this time frame? He wanted to know if I had an answer for him. Just bring something already baked. I squeezed his shoulder affectionately before walking back to the cottage, the moon just an outline in the sky, waiting for her turn to shine. Peppily was pink with excitement. He wore his best sweater vest, brilliantly knitted colors spilling together at the seams. On the kitchen counter, he had 9 different types of liquor, 4 bottles of wine, and an abundance of ripening fruit laid out on display. My mom was enjoying a petite glass of wine as she waited on her cassoulet to finish baking. I pranced around the dining room simply because that's what you do when music is playing.
That's great.
Nice.
Thank you. That's
job.
wonderful. And that's Just a Birdhouse.
Just a birdhouse, yeah.
Now, how'd you come up with the title of the book?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked this question because I was really hesitant about naming it that. The original title was A Rosary in the Closet, and it had a double meaning. But I wanted to make sure that this book was relatable and accessible. I didn't want the title to keep people at bay, so I changed it to Just a Birdhouse, which also has a lot of meaning within the book, so it works.
Yeah, because I would imagine is like for both of you. Well, I suppose Jazzy, more the question is for you. How many times have you reimagined the title of a book that you've been writing?
Oh, many times. Leveling Up, I had a totally different name before, and it took me forever to think of this name, and now I love the name of this book. Leveling Up is not just about the video game leveling up within the game, but it's also about them leveling up with their relationships and the way that they interact with each other. So I'm happy with it, but it took me a long time to get that. And that's not always true. I mean, for some of the books, the names are really easy to think of.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about Musings of a Mad Woman, because, man, that's fun.
And
is
the
that
big
an
question
autobiography?
Partly autobiography. Yeah, no. It's funny though, because I have 3 different point of views in there. So 3 different protagonists, and any of them could be named the Mad Woman. But
okay.
But the word that title is actually a course that one of the secondary protagonists, one of them actually teaches that class at a college. So.
Oh my God, that's so great. And I have another question for you. Actually, we do have some questions that, that the audience is going to ask, but while we wait for the next one to pop up, in your bio, you talked about how you were an English teacher, but then, and writing, doing a lot of creative writing, but then law school drove the creativity out of you.
Oh no.
And I'm wondering, how did you get it back?
Yeah,
because you didn't quit law school. Right?
It's so funny, isn't it? And it's I even took those. You can take those tests to see if you're left brain or right brain.
Yeah.
And so left brain is very logical, and right brain is creative. And so before I entered law school, I was definitely right brain, very, very creative. My undergraduate was English, in the English language. So I was very into that. I went to law school, and then I took one of those tests, and I was totally left brain. Like my creativity was gone. And
so it's not like it beat it out of you. It's just that you changed your focus.
My focus changed. Yes. Because, in law school, they teach you how to think logically, and there's no room for creativity except for figuring out the best ways to insult another attorney in writing. So that's about it. And so after law school and I began practicing, then I started to read again and do some writing little by little. But yeah, I mean, law school, you just don't have time or space to be creative, really.
Have you thought about, or have you written a book that takes place in like the legal world?
Oh, yes. I've written a couple of them.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
And Emily, do you have, I know you're just launching your very first book, but do you already have your second book coming to haunt you at night?
I do. I'm like, I want to say 40,000 words into my next book, which I'm actually really excited about because I'm taking inspiration from my childhood best friends. And it's so fun and they're excited about it. I'll send them little excerpts about their characters and they can't wait. So it's really, really exciting. But and you know the author Jodi Picoult, so she puts so much research into each one of her books. They're always on a different specific topic, and I'm kind of taking that type of approach. I'm including a topic that I've never written about, so it's taking me a lot longer because I want to make sure I'm accurate and factual. So I'm being very meticulous in the research and going through all that. And I like to believe I'm an analytical person, but I don't think I am. I'm much more on the creative side. So it's taking me a bit longer.
Then we have a question from Ashley Tobias, who is asking specifically, how much research did you need to do for your books?
Oh, yes, lots and lots of research. I know nothing about video game production or any of that. How to create a video game and then produce it and get it out to the masses. I didn't even know what it was like when they do the introduction of the video game and what forums they go on nowadays. I had to talk to my son who's 15 about that, about Discord and Slack and things like that. I don't know. So
how is it though? Let me ask you that you wanted to set this around a video game. Then, if you didn't even know anything about it, how'd that happen?
Yeah, I can't answer that. I don't know why I thought of it. I just woke up one day and said, hey, I think I'm going to write about a video game animator and graphic designer. I have no idea where that came from, but I figured it would be fun. And you know what? I don't mind researching. So I did a lot of research, and then I reached out to experts in those fields and asked them to read through the manuscript and let me know if it seemed on point or if I had put something in there that didn't make sense. And they said it was on point. So I'm like, yes, it's a go.
Great, good.
That's funny because so Ashley's actually someone is one of my friends, and my novel that's coming out now, I have a lot of experiences that we experienced together in the book.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's really exciting because when it comes out and you can read it, you'll see all of the like adventures we've had are kind of molded in there, you know, we in there.
Wow. I'm going to ask another trivia question because we have some more books to give away. In 1849, Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to earn what degree? If anybody wants to go ahead and text put your answer in the chat, the first one to get it right will win a copy of a book. Nice. Meanwhile, back to Emily Fohr and Jazzy Mitchell, who are both with us today talking about their lives as writers. Jazzy, you're in Oregon, in Portland, and Emily, you're in LA. I'm in New York, so we're sort of covering the country, not quite. Where do you get the idea for your plot? Is it something that you need to plan? Do you go, oh, time to write a book? What am I going to write it about? Or does it come to you as your head hits the pillow at night or when you wake up in the middle of the night?
I would say 70% of the time I start writing and I don't have a single clue where it's going. And it just kind of comes. Actually, Just a Birdhouse, it's funny how that I started writing that by looking at pictures. I was on Instagram. This is super interesting. I was on Instagram, and there's one account, I don't remember what it is, and they just have all these pictures of the Italian countryside, the French countryside. And I was bored, and I just started writing, you know, based on what I was looking at, just the pictures. And it all kind of started flowing from there. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes I'll have an idea, and I'll, you know, make notes in my notes app on my phone. Other times, yeah, I have no clue where it's going, and I just kind of let it happen. I don't know.
Jazzy?
It comes from everywhere, and I've warned people that anything they do or say can show up in my next novel. And
Uh-huh.
it does. It does.
Yep.
I mean, if a certain person reads it, they're going to say, I know that happened," that sort of thing. So I mix it up. I think it really is all around us. If something piques our interest, and then all of a sudden you're thinking where that can go. And I write fan fiction, and I have for a long time now. So and fan fiction is great because it already has a setup. It already has characters that or the place where it is, and you can kind of riff off of that. So it's kind of the same technique where I see something, or I see someone, or I think of an event, and then I'm able to go off with that idea.
It's also nice because it already has fans.
Exactly.
Right. Well, fan fiction always seems to me sort of like spring training, or like practice. Like, here's a really good, inspiration. Here are the characters. Here's the scenario. Take it off into a new direction, or move it forward. And I think that's, when you can do that, you're probably really working with that creative muscle and really getting it to be always on point. It's interesting that the more you do, the more you do. Do you both find that to be true in terms of writing?
Oh, yes. When I stopped writing during the pandemic, it was done, But then once I started writing again, then I was thinking of other ideas for other books too. I always say that's like with your schedule too. The busier you are, the more you get done. And it's not because you're doing all these things, 10 things. It's more like you just become more productive and more creative and able to multitask, and you're just able to do it. Whereas if you only have one thing going on that week, you get nothing done that week. It's just that one thing.
Procrastination is like not always a bad thing, but
yeah,
but there's definitely, I agree, there's a momentum that's created by the more you have to do, then the more you're just like in that mode of getting things produced. Do you tend to stick to a particular schedule when you're writing?
No.
Not at all. No.
No, huh? So Emily, take me through a day where you are writing in your book. I mean, are you getting up in the morning and going, maybe I'll get to it, maybe I won't, or is there a plan?
It really depends on if I have something already in my head, like if I have inspiration, if I know what I'm going to write, then yes, I'll wake up. I mean, I wake up in the morning, every single morning. I have exactly 2 cups of coffee. And I'll sit in bed on the weekends. And if I have something in my head, yes, I'll go right to writing. I really like to put on those on YouTube, those like ambiance videos with lo-fi or just beautiful backgrounds and scenery. It really like gets me, in a good Zen area. But if I don't have anything in my head, I'll pull up my manuscript and I'll sit and stare at it for 30 minutes. I'll do something else. It'll just be on my screen. And sometimes I exit out with not a single edit and I'm done for the day. But at least I had it up on my computer.
Right. So you do like you do have some sort of play with it during the day, whether you move forward or not.
Yeah, it always ends up on my computer open. And if I do something, I do something. If I don't, I don't. But at least I tried.
Right. And what about you, Jazzy?
I really admire those authors that get up each morning and write 2,000 words or whatever, and they stick to a schedule. That's not me at all. I couldn't if I tried. You know what? I came to the conclusion that when I force myself to do that, I end up throwing out that piece anyways. It's usually garbage. So I just wait to be kind of tapped on the shoulder, and then I start writing and I keep writing. I can usually finish a book within a couple of weeks once I start the process.
Wow, that's
but I will do research and I will think about the book for months before I start writing it. So I'm kind of still working on it.
Yeah. When is the first time you ever had that experience of like the muse on your shoulder, or having a character go, here's what I want?
Probably Musings of a Mad Woman, and that might be telling.
See, it is an autobiography. How about you, Emily?
Oh my goodness. That's hard. I don't know. I feel like everything I've ever written, I've always had some kind of almost like a painting of a person in my head that I'm writing about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm very visual when it comes to that. So I always like to be looking at a picture or a painting or something to come up with what I'm writing about. I don't know. That's a difficult question.
What's the hardest part of writing a book?
All of it?
Oh, okay,
No,
wait,
I'm just kidding.
let me ask a question. Ashley Tobias is asking, what part of the book did you have the hardest time writing?
Okay. Probably the end.
Yes. Yeah. Same thing. Yep. Same exact thing.
I think it's hard to leave my character sometimes. And you really, and this comes sometimes with experience, you have to learn when there's a pause, a good time to just walk away.
Yep. Close it off, say goodbye, know that you're like, it's finished, feel good about it. And it's hard because when you're in that process, Jazzy, I don't know about you, but you almost feel like you want to keep it going because you feel so involved. But you can't keep the book going forever. So at some point you have to tell yourself, okay, this is the end. Maybe not everyone will be happy, but hopefully everyone will have felt something.
Yes.
And that's it. Yeah.
Would either of you envision a point where you have a character that you're just so enmeshed in that you would write a second book, or that you begin maybe a sequel?
Well, I'm doing book 2, To You Matter, and it's not going to be the same.
Is it You Still Matter?
It's funny because someone said, "How about You Matter Too?" Haven't decided on the title yet, but so I'll have some of the protagonists from You Matter in it, but they're not going to be the main focus. I'm going to focus on a secondary character, and so I'll keep it going. You'll know what happens from those characters because I love those characters, but we're going to look at it from a different point of view.
And how about you, Emily?
I like the idea of it, but I'm more of a person who when I do something and I finish and it's done, I leave it at that. I really do adore, though, Jazzy, what your idea of, taking a character but not having them the main character, which is, again, I'm going to reference Jodi Picoult, but I love her. But she does that with so many of her characters pop up in all of her books, but they'll be smaller characters in the book. So one character in one of her books that's the main character will be a really small character, do a little cameo in her other book. And I like that idea. That's something I would play with as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they call them Easter eggs when you pull in characters from your other books into a new book. And
it makes it exciting for the reader,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both for spending some time this afternoon. This was really very fun and really interesting.
Thank you,
I want to wish you luck with
Cindy.
Jazzy with Leveling Up and Emily with Just a Birdhouse. I'm sure that a lot of people will be very happy that you women decided to do some writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy.
You. Thanks, Cindy.
Take care.
Nice seeing you, Emily.
Yeah, nice seeing you too. Bye.
Bye.